Hi, this story was told to me by a friend. He wished to remain anonymous but allowed me to share the story with you. It will be told from his perspective. Hi, I've been traveling and visiting unusual places for 10 years now. I've been to an old abandoned city in Pripyat, to many derelict buildings, and even to a deserted military base. But I had never been to a place like this before, and the anticipation was insane. The abandoned Maunsell Fort, a legendary place in Britain, built during World War II and decommissioned in 1950. This iconic site looks extremely eerie, like it's frozen in time, a remnant of the past. Getting there isn't hard. I first visited during a daytime tour, and later I came back at night, but you're only allowed to enter the first level. Going up is strictly forbidden because the structure has rusted and hasn't been maintained in over 70 years. Climbing is very dangerous, but I didn't care. I was already thinking of a way to sneak in. Obviously, it had to be done at night so the Coast Guard wouldn't notice us. This place is off limits. I didn't want to end up in jail, so my friend and I decided to take a kayak. We spent a lot of time preparing. We memorized our route and calculated exactly where we'd need to go in total darkness. If I remember correctly, the route was about 10 miles from the shore, but since we had to remain unnoticed, we started a bit further away from an old beach. We only brought a rope, water, and flashlights. Oh, and a phone. But there's no signal out there. I had already checked that during the tour. So, we set off from the shore in our kayak. We followed the exact course we had planned. I had a strong feeling this would be the most unusual place I'd ever visited, and one of the most dangerous. When we approached the fort, it was absolutely mesmerizing. They looked as if they still housed a garrison. We shone our powerful flashlights at one of the structures. It looked incredible and terrifying at the same time. These forts used to be connected by bridges, and moving between the buildings was easy. But now the bridges are gone, and only one of the towers still has a ladder. That's where we headed. The ladder was badly rusted after all these years and looked very unsafe. Plus, to reach it, we had to throw a rope up to it. Jeremy and I tried tossing a rope with a hook at the end. It took us 30 tries to get it to catch. All this time we were surrounded by water and a few abandoned, rusty structures. The view and the atmosphere are impossible to describe in words, and at any moment we could have been found and arrested. I was the first to climb up since I had more experience than Jeremy. I went up the rope and grabbed the old iron ladder. It didn't look stable, so I had to climb up and make sure the floor above wouldn't collapse under us. I got to the top and stepped inside. On the first level, the floor creaked under my feet. Everything was rotten. It was very dark inside, but I didn't pay attention to that. I was only thinking about Jeremy and whether he should come up. I told him the floor probably wouldn't support both of us and let him decide. He thought it over and chose to stay below. We agreed to take turns exploring so it would be safer. All right, I went ahead. I turned around, and for the first time I really looked at my surroundings. It was much worse than outside. Maybe the darkness made it feel that way. Inside, there was an old generator and lots of metal boxes. I carefully stepped forward, testing the floor beneath me. One wrong move could kill me. The machinery room was the least interesting part. It looked like a regular basement in an old house. I needed to go higher. I knew there used to be soldier quarters upstairs. I found the next ladder, and when I stepped on it, I almost fell. Damn, that was dangerous. My heart was racing. Jeremy had no idea I nearly died, but nothing could stop me now. I climbed the metal ladder, and at some point, I heard a sound. A strange noise, like something creaked above. What was that? Maybe a bird. I reached the next floor. There were old beds, and one of them still had a mattress. Everything was rotting and smelled horribly of damp. On an old table stood a rusty mug, and next to it were documents. Someone had left their papers behind when they left. It had been so long ago that even the thought of it gave me a weird feeling. Back in the day, up to 90 soldiers could be stationed in one of these structures. And now everything was decaying. People once slept on these beds, talked, played poker, and told jokes. They're probably all dead now. Another noise from the upper deck. I got goosebumps. I checked everything and headed to the next ladder when I heard it again. It sounded like someone walking right above me. What the hell? What were those noises? I climbed higher. There were more beds. This room looked much better. It had a stove, beds, and nightstands. I decided to check the old drawers. All of them were empty, except one. Inside was a note. Looked like one of the soldiers had left it. I unrolled the piece of paper and was surprised by how well it had been preserved. It was about a woman waiting for her husband. He wanted to see his son and her as soon as possible. He hoped the war would end soon and he could return to his family. But at the end, the text suddenly cut off. Why didn't he finish it? Another sound from above. This place was messing with my head. The warlike atmosphere was messing with my judgment. I climbed to the top level to look down from the highest point. Anti-aircraft guns used to be here. I looked around and shouted to Jeremy that I'd made it to the top. I couldn't see him, but he was right below me. As I turned my head, I noticed something shining in one of the nearby buildings. I pointed my flashlight at it, and someone shone back at me. I was stunned. My first thought was that Jeremy had gone to another fort on his own. I yelled at him to come back quickly because I was about to climb down. The light in the opposite window disappeared as soon as I turned off my flashlight. What was he doing? I had to go down. I turned to the ladder, looked down, and saw a face. I stumbled back and fell to the floor. What was that? I slowly approached the hatch and pointed my flashlight inside. Nothing. I was so scared I forgot all about being careful. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. I really hoped I had imagined it, but I wasn't going to check again. I climbed down to the first floor and looked down. Jeremy was still standing in the same spot. I climbed all the way down and asked him how he got back so quickly. Jeremy didn't understand what I was talking about. I told him I'd seen a flashlight in the building across from us. He didn't believe me and decided to climb up himself. I tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. When Jeremy came back, he said it was one of the most boring places he'd ever been. I don't know what I saw that night, but unlike Jeremy, I'll remember that place for a long time. And I really hope everything that happened there was just in my imagination. Hi everyone, my name is Emmy, and I want to tell you a story about how my friend and I encountered a creepy stranger. At the time, we had no idea how much danger we were actually in. Claire and I have been friends since we were very young, but we live far from each other. Every Friday evening we meet up and go for a walk. That day, I went to her house so we could go somewhere we hadn't been before. I already knew we were going to the lake in the forest. We had been there before, but never went too far. It's not really a lake, it's more like a huge swamp, and we were looking for an adventure. I went to Claire's house because she lived closer, and our route started from there. She lives on the edge of town, and it's about a 10-minute walk to the forest. When I arrived, Claire came outside and told me we needed to run. She was afraid her parents wouldn't let her go into the forest, so she decided not to tell them anything. We snuck out without anyone noticing. Our trip to the forest had officially begun. We walked along a narrow trail people use as a shortcut. That trail leads to a bus stop, but we didn't need to go there. We planned to leave the path and find the lake. As we walked, we talked about guys, listened to music, and gossiped about other friends. Basically, we were just chatting about everything. Then suddenly, a strange man appeared in front of us. He was walking straight toward us and came out of the woods. Right away, he seemed suspicious and dangerous to me. I whispered to Claire that there was a creepy guy ahead. She slipped her hands into her pocket. She always carries pepper spray with her. At that moment, I thought he would just walk past us. At least, I hoped so. But as soon as we got close, he stopped right in front of us. His face was hidden under a hood, and I couldn't make it out. He asked,
"What are you doing out here all alone? Aren't you scared to walk through the forest?"
I stayed silent, but Claire didn't. "That's none of your business," she said. The man didn't reply, just spat on the ground and walked away. Damn, that was really creepy. The whole way, we kept talking about that man and imagining what we would have done if he had attacked us. We eventually reached a secluded spot. There were no sounds of cars or any signs of people anymore. The air was fresh, the area was clean, and full of mosquitoes. There were several small water spots in the swamp and one large pond. Claire noticed something shining in the distance, and we headed toward it. It was an old boat. It was starting to get dark, and we knew we should be heading home. But we weren't going anywhere until we checked out the boat. The boat was overgrown with grass and bushes, but that didn't stop Claire. She climbed inside. I didn't want to take the risk and asked her to hurry up. Claire thought it was fun, but I was getting more and more anxious by the minute. I really didn't want to walk home through the forest at night. I kept looking around, felt like someone was walking nearby. "Claire, please, let's go home." She didn't answer. I couldn't see her anymore. She had disappeared the moment I turned away. "Claire, where are you?" Damn, I nearly had a heart attack from the fear. "Never do that again," Claire laughed. She said there was nothing interesting in the boat, just some old clothes and a pack of cigarettes. We started walking back the way we came, but the rustling in the forest wouldn't let me relax. I had the constant feeling that someone was watching us. Claire tried to calm me down and said there were lots of wild animals in the forest, but I didn't feel any better. We reached the spot where we had met the creepy man. It was already dark, and a light fog had started to roll in. I was really scared because I'm afraid of the dark. Claire kept laughing at me, joking that she'd protect me from zombies and ghosts. Suddenly I heard rustling again, this time directly ahead, behind the trees. I stopped and pointed my phone flashlight toward it. "Claire, someone's standing there." We both stood still, staring into the darkness. "Run!" I took off after Claire, running toward the road as fast as I could, not daring to look back. When we finally reached the roadside, I was in tears and covered in scratches. "What did you see, Claire?" I asked. She looked at me and, with a trembling voice, said, "It was him. He was watching us. That man." At that moment, I nearly lost my mind. I realized he'd been following us the whole time, even when we were near the boat. We went to Claire's house and decided to tell her parents everything. They scolded us harshly, but we didn't want anyone else to be in danger walking through that forest. Everyone understood that the man had behaved really strangely, and it couldn't be kept secret. Her parents contacted the police to warn others. I don't know what that man intended to do, but I know for sure he had no right to follow us. Hi, my name is Carl, and until recently, I was serving in the U.S. Army. I was a reconnaissance scout and completed full training. I can't say where I was stationed, but I can tell you a story that happened to me during one of my missions. Our command sent us to a location where illegal border crossings were taking place. It was really a job for the Border Patrol, not us, but there had been an incident nearby, and we were sent as replacements. More specifically, they sent me and my driver. The place was near a small river overgrown with bushes, trees, and other vegetation, but there was only one spot where signs of human activity were visible. That's where migrants were illegally crossing the border. My task was to guard the area and arrest any violators. I knew it was a quiet place, and the only real way to cross the fast-moving river was at that one point. I had a tent fully at my disposal and a radio for communication. My driver had a different assignment. He was supposed to travel between other similar covert locations and gather intel. We met up about once every 2 hours so I could report that I hadn't seen anything. I didn't expect anything to happen during the day. I was waiting for nightfall, which offered perfect conditions for someone to move across the water undetected. It was going to be a tough task, especially since I was already tired, and in the dark, a place like this is filled with all kinds of noises. Once it got dark, I started stepping out of the tent every time I heard rustling or strange sounds. And trust me, there were a lot of sounds. At night, the wilderness comes alive. I've never been afraid of the woods or of camping in the forest. I did it often during my service and even as a kid with my father. But that night felt different. It was a little eerie. Maybe it was because of the river nearby. I don't know why, but I felt a strong discomfort being there. The tall grass blocked my view, and I think that's what made me uneasy. I couldn't fully control the situation. At any moment, someone could sneak up behind me or from the side. I was in a vulnerable position, but I had a Colt, and that gave me some peace of mind. Of course, that night the humidity was high, and a thick fog rolled in. Around 1 a.m., John showed up to receive my report. I stepped out of the tent and was honestly glad to see him. In moments like that, it's important to remind yourself that you're not alone. I told him everything was quiet and under control. We had a smoke, and then he headed back to his vehicle. I forgot to mention, the road was about 500 meters from the tent. I was alone again, and just about to crawl back into the tent when I noticed something glinting in the distance across the river. I stopped and stared out carefully. It looked like something was reflecting light, but I couldn't tell exactly what it was. Turning on my flashlight could give away my position, so I chose not to use it. The fog was thick. Visibility was near zero. It was cold outside, and after standing there for 5 minutes, I decided to go back into the tent. In the army, they taught me not to jump to conclusions, and to accept that if I wasn't sure about something, then I simply didn't know. That meant I had to stay alert and be ready for anything. Damn it. Now I knew I had to check the river. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped outside, and pointed it toward the water. Nothing. No signs of anyone being in the river. I even waited a couple more minutes, and unless it was the strongest diver in the world, there was definitely no one out there. I went back inside and sat there for about 30 minutes. I was starting to get a little sleepy since there wasn't much else to do. And then I heard another strange sound, like someone creeping through the thick brush. I stepped out and called out, "Who's there?" But there was no reply, so I made the decision to go after whoever it was. I walked into the tall grass, heading straight toward the sound of footsteps. The grass kept getting taller, and I called out again, "Who's there? You've crossed the border illegally and I can detain you." Then everything went quiet. I was standing in the middle of grass taller than I was. There was water and mud under my boots. I realized I had wandered so far that I couldn't even tell where I had come from. I had the feeling that there were people all around me, playing games with me. I felt so uneasy that I decided to draw my weapon. I turned around and started making my way back, trying to find the tent. I followed some trampled grass, but at some point I realized those weren't my tracks. I stopped and saw a silhouette about 20 meters ahead. A head was poking out above the tall grass. It was staring right at me. I said something to it. I don't even remember what. It just kept watching me. Suddenly, I heard a sound behind me, and something pushed me. I accidentally fired a shot into the ground, and when I looked ahead again, there was no one there. I made it back to the tent and called the driver. He arrived quickly with 2 more guys. We searched the area, but in the darkness, we didn't find anyone. Honestly, at that moment, I was thinking like a soldier following orders. But looking back at the situation now, I realize those people I encountered could have done much worse to me. I know of other cases that didn't end so well. That night made me reflect on a lot, and I understood how the army had turned me into a robot. That night was unsettling not just for me, but for those who, despite everything, didn't hurt me, even while putting themselves at risk.